The Locked On Podcast Network presents The Big 6 in 60. The 6 biggest national sports stories from the local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network. Get the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 60 minutes. The Big 6 in 60 starts now with the biggest story in sports.
It's officially official. John Harbaugh out.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast.
John Harbaugh out as the Baltimore Ravens head coach after 18 seasons. The Ravens have done it, and it is the right move. So we have 5 days a week plus more daily Ravens coverage and content here for you on the show. We'll be spearheading this thing. Head coach search for the Ravens. New details, I'm sure, will come out about this. And we'll talk about those on tomorrow's show and through the rest of these shows. But, man, I am all jumbled up right now because I was losing faith. I'll be honest with you. I was losing faith that the Ravens were actually going to go out there and make this move. But I see a lot of people talking about it where, you know, it feels like I can breathe again a little bit. And it's a big deal. You know, John Harbaugh had a great 18 years with the Ravens. You know, he's a Super Bowl winner, and you know, a lot of teams, again, would do anything for the success that the Ravens have had over the course of the regular season. But that's not what, you know, you play for. You play for Super Bowls, and John Harbaugh seemed like his mentality on that was waning. Seemed like he got comfortable in that, you know, all this regular season success is going to be fine, and we're going to do this. Well, not so much. And now Baltimore embarks on a new journey to find their head coach. And apparently, you know, as details continue to come out about this situation, but we know, and I said this on this morning's show when talking about the reports that were coming out about, oh, well, Harbaugh is probably going to stay. And, you know, there's that inclination that that's going to happen. For Steve Bisciotti, this was a huge turning point for the organization and honestly for the fan base, where it just felt like, you know, the fan base was hanging on by a thread with this, and each individual thread within that thread, like with every big playoff loss, every bad playoff moment, every poor decision, it was just, you know, snapping like one by one. And this exit this season felt like it is going, I mean, that felt like it was it. And if that wasn't enough, if that wasn't the straw to break the camel's back, then what was it going to be? So this, to me, for the Ravens, it's a commitment to winning. It's a commitment to winning. And I don't mean winning in the regular season, because I think that's what John Harbaugh was for. But Harbaugh, over the course of his Ravens tenure, I'll actually pull up his stats real quick. I mean, again, this was not about Harbaugh being a bad coach to me. I know some people believe that. I personally don't. This was just about the fact that it was time. Sometimes it's time, and it was time. Harbaugh finishes his Ravens tenure 180 and 113. No ties for John Harbaugh. I do appreciate that with Harbaugh. But we can look at it this way, right? From 2015 all the way down to 2025. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That's 11. 11. We counted from 1 to 11. 3 playoff wins in 11 seasons. And that even goes back before Lamar Jackson. That was not going to cut it. This is a big deal and a big decision, and one that might not work, by the way. One that might not work, where, you know, the Ravens have to get this hire right. But I would rather them go and get this hire wrong than not try it all. I think that they needed to switch things up. They need to take that risk. And, you know, it's a little, it's like we've talked about with Greg Roman and Todd Monken over and over and over again. I mean, there are a lot of good coaches this cycle, which we'll get into. I know people are already putting them in the chat live here. And if you have any names, be sure to put them in the chat live. If you're with us in the comments or audio form, be sure to, you know, put your names in there as well. But this, to me, I believe that John Harbaugh will get another opportunity, right? I know the Giants have been heavily linked to him. There are other teams that maybe might fire their head coaches to get the opportunity to hire John Harbaugh. But there's going to be a lot of other conversations that have to be had within the organization. People are talking about, you know, potentially Brian Flores and others like Clint Kubiak and others. But there are a lot. I see Minter from Steve. What's up, Steve? I just feel like this was the right decision because the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. And we just saw it happen in so many different ways. It was losing in terrible fashion, losing close games. There was a stat that I read out this morning and I posted on social media that was put out by First Things First overtime, OT. The Ravens' wins and losses in games decided by 5 points or less under John Harbaugh, 45 and 61. The 61 losses are the most in the NFL since 2008. This year, they were 0-4. You see the graphic of continuous fourth quarter collapses, not being able to hold a lead. And again, like Harbaugh's not the only reason why this is happening, but the head coach, it goes to the top. He's in those meetings. He has final say, and it just felt like at times he forgot he was the head coach. And again, the lackadaisical mindset for me was really in that interview on the lounge where he said all the garbage, and that's his word, garbage, about Super Bowl or bust. Like, that is what John Harbaugh said. He said it's all phony. And I'm just like, why is that phony when you have a generational quarterback at the helm? I mean, it's a lot. And I see, as Ramiro said there, 2 decades, it's a big decision and a big deal, and it could backfire, but I do not believe that it will. I think that this is the decision that needed to happen, because at the end of the day, they couldn't run it back with this duo, right? With Lamar and John Harbaugh. They needed to choose, and they chose Lamar. And that, to me, I am very grateful for this organization for doing that, because that was the right call. That was the right decision. And you, as an organization, and I said this after the loss, I said this all season, they needed to look themselves hard in the mirror and think about what they want. Because if you're going to try to go for this thing with Lamar Jackson, you need a lot of pieces at the helm. And again, like, that now falls, like, the shift now focuses to Eric DeCosta, because I think that it's all a shield thing, right? I think Greg Roman and some of these coordinators were shielding John Harbaugh. That shield was removed, and John Harbaugh took the full force of that. Now this new head coach is going to come in, whoever it is, and, that'll be spearheaded, I'm sure, by Steve Bisciotti, Eric DeCosta. I'm sure Lamar will be involved in some conversations there as well. But at this point, now all the attention shifts to Eric DeCosta and what he will do this offseason. So we'll get into that as the show continues on. But, I do want to say about Harbaugh that he does have a lot of qualities that a lot of teams look for in terms of his, culture building and regular season success. But when you lose all that, and that's what it felt like happened, right? It slowly started to deteriorate. Felt like the messaging wasn't getting through. In the post game, a lot of players were saying, it's not my pay grade. And, a couple of players like Derrick Henry said he loves John Harbaugh and all this type of stuff. I know Lamar Jackson's comments were getting a lot of, honestly, criticism, which I didn't even believe was happening because Lamar didn't even say anything. But as it goes, I guess, with Lamar Jackson. But you couldn't justify to the fan base. And honestly, you probably couldn't justify to the players, especially the guys that have been there. I mean, imagine telling Ronnie Stanley or Lamar or some of these guys. I mean, Ronnie's been there forever. Marlon, if he returns or not, I don't know. But Marlon's been there forever. Some of these guys that have been in Baltimore for 7, 8, 9, 10 seasons, whatever it may be, after going through all of these playoff losses, all of these playoff disappointments, and saying, hey, we're going to run this back because we really think this can be the year. How many this can be the year conversations do you have to have? Like I've said, I'm tired of this team going on revenge tours. It feels like we've had 10 billion revenge tours in the last 5 seasons. It just feels like every year, oh, well, man, they're going to get revenge on the Chiefs, or they're going to get revenge on the Bills. But then you just have new ways to lose, it feels like. It just felt like the Ravens were inventing new ways to lose. And hopefully we can be done with that. A new coach that comes in, and I know the hot thing is, bright offensive mind or bright defensive mind. I don't care if the Ravens bring in a delegator or not, where it's another coach like John Harbaugh, who's just quite honestly better at doing it. I just felt like Harbaugh, as his career went on, never really mastered it. I think to a degree he did at a certain point in his career, but it just felt like that aspect of him fell off of a cliff. And I see, even, Lauren saying he nearly lost the Super Bowl in the fourth quarter. There were signs. There were signs. And again, there was a lot of controversy about Harbaugh early in his Ravens tenure. And, we've heard multiple former players speak about it and how, for the Ravens, this was a hard process for John Harbaugh to really find himself as a head coach. And to his credit, he did. I'm not trying to discredit everything John Harbaugh did. I think that'd be foolish. But early in his career, He came in and tried to be, hey, this is how I want to do things. We're going to do it. And you had a lot of veteran leaders in that locker room, Ray Lewis, Ed Reed, a lot of strong personalities, et cetera, et cetera. That wasn't going to fly. And we heard about all the stuff about the mutiny or whatever. And, some of the reports and rumors that have come out. But at some point, you have to ask, and coaches have been fired for a lot less. And this is a coach that will go down in Baltimore Ravens history. He will be in the Ravens Ring of Honor one day. But there's so much here that I do want to genuinely praise the Ravens organization for, because I had genuinely lost a lot of hope that they were actually going to do this, that they were actually going to say, we need a change. And it's hard, right? Change is hard. Look, I'll tell you, I don't like change. Change is a hard thing to go through, whether it be as a sports organization, just in real life, change can be hard, right? It's difficult. It's unknown. But I think when you run into that wall over and over again and you cannot break through, you're trying and, you lose with drop 2-point conversions and fumbles and turnovers and bad decisions and bad game plans, lack of adjustments, like all this type of stuff, it all trickles down. So I think for me, you now are able to enter a new era. It's a breath of fresh air. And again, this probably should have happened a year ago, but better late than never, I guess. So I do genuinely like the John Harbaugh, like the messaging should be like, thank you for everything. But at the same time, it's like there also was a lot that could have gone better. No coach is perfect. No, like literally no coach. The Super Bowl, we all got to thank John Harbaugh for that. The consistent success and the culture he did build. But again, it just feels like it started to deteriorate over time.
The wild card round is here, and FanDuel is officially in playoff mode. Before every game during the NFL playoffs, FanDuel is giving customers even more ways to get in on the action. Right now, every NFL playoff game day, FanDuel users get a profit boost pack waiting for them inside the app. Each game day, you'll see a pack loaded with multiple profit boosts you can apply to bets you like most. Open your profit boost pack first thing on game day and see what boosts you want to apply. The boost lets you lean into your game day instincts, whether you're backing momentum, defense, quarterback, play, or coaching. Every play feels bigger, and the boosts make your bets feel that way too. Visit FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL, and grab your profit boost pack every NFL playoff game day.
Ole Miss versus Miami. It is a Final Four. It is the national semifinals.
You are Locked On College Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
There's plenty going on around Miami. People thought they wouldn't even get to the playoff or shouldn't get to the playoff. And then here we both are in the Final Four. But I cannot compete with losing my head coach right before the playoffs and staff members right before the Final Four. Like, you have me beat there, Steven, in a lot of ways.
It's absolutely good. We're gonna talk about that. We're gonna talk about past the victory. We're gonna talk about this game that, look at Locked On Canes people listening to this. If they win the game in the Fiesta Bowl, they get a home game for the national championship. That there's so many storylines right now that we will talk about as it goes. Remember, we're free and available on all the podcast apps and on YouTube. Special hello to the insiders and everydayers that kind of make the show what it is. Thank you very much, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for your first purchase. That would come in handy even today if you're trying to get into the gates at the Fiesta Bowl. Put in the code LOCKEDONCollege. You can get $20 off your first purchase. Alex, you talked about the storylines. Listen, even Locked On Canes, I joke about that other than Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and probably Coral Gables, Florida, the rest of the country is rooting for Ole Miss, which is a very weird feeling if you've been through the history of Ole Miss and all of that. But this is a situation where the head coach literally left for a rival that you play a trophy with for, because he said on his way out the door that you could not do this. And then Ole Miss and Pete Golding are just doing it.
And honestly, I love it for Ole Miss. And if not for the fact that they're matching up against Miami, like if they were playing either of the other two teams, I would be rooting for Ole Miss to get this done and to get to the championship, because I think it's an incredible story. I think Lane looks like a complete saboteur and a narcissist with the way he handled this whole situation. So it really is incredible. And like you mentioned, the part about, people outside of Coral Gables and Baton Rouge rooting for Ole Miss. I think there's something about Miami fans and even Miami coaches and players. I kind of think that's the way they want it. I think in a lot of programs out there try to really embrace the us against the world mentality, but it means a little something extra for Miami. I mean, with the history of Miami's football program being like the bad guys during the 1980s and the 90s, during the Jimmy Johnson swagger era and the scandals back in the old days, like I really think Miami kind of gets fuel and energy out of being doubted and being rooted against. And then, of course, for a guy like Reuben Bain Jr. on Miami's defensive line, being doubted is like his fuel. He has that maniacal notebook that he keeps where he writes down all the perceived disrespect. I will say Ole Miss is doing a pretty good job keeping the main thing and keeping it respectful. You're not getting a lot of bulletin board material yet.
So much respect. It's a respect off between Ole Miss and Miami right now.
Yeah.
Mario Cristobal said that Ole Miss was the best team that they were going to play and have played this season. It is a respect off between these two teams. Now, it's going to be fun whenever it happens in Glendale. Both teams are going to travel very well. It's going to be a very festive atmosphere. And that, in my opinion, is one of the benefits whenever teams that aren't recently been in these type games or in these games, that the energy in this place is just off the charts. Georgia travels everywhere. They famously took over Notre Dame Stadium one year on a road game because of the way they traveled. They were outnumbered by 70% to 30% in the Sugar Bowl. Ole Miss fans are juiced. Now, granted, New Orleans, we always joke about the three biggest cities in Mississippi is New Orleans, Memphis, and Mobile. But we will say this: they're going to travel to Glendale, and if they make it to Miami, they're going to sell that puppy out.
Yeah, I believe it. And like you said about the energy, for both of these fan bases, and I think it catches people a little off guard with the Miami side because, of course, people always have the jokes about Miami, not selling out their own stadium, and they don't have a lot of alumni, but Miami's been traveling really well. I think a lot of folks, Miami's a weird situation because it's a small private university and a lot of the alumni live all around the country. So they travel pretty well when they have big games and, playoff. Well, this is their first playoff, but when they have big, postseason situations, fans tend to travel well for that. I thought they did, they were outnumbered by Ohio State fans, of course, in the Cotton Bowl, but I thought it was more like a 70-30 or 60-40 Ohio State. Miami traveled pretty well for that. I would imagine they're going to travel well to Arizona, although the Fiesta Bowl brings back some awful memories for Miami. They're 0-2 all-time in Fiesta Bowls, famously the 1-2 against Ohio State. So they got their revenge against Ohio State last week. They haven't gotten their revenge against the Fiesta Bowl yet. So it's going to be like a haunted ground for Miami fans to step into.
You got to wait for Penn State for that one. Vinny Testaverde's got to deal with that.
Exactly. Oh, man, exactly. But, I expect both fan bases to be juiced because, like you said, they haven't experienced something like this in a long time. And also, just having these two schools match up, this hasn't happened since 1951, Miami versus Ole Miss. So it's always cool to face a school that you've never played before or haven't played in, generations in this case.
Yeah, and there's two really funny facts going into this game. First of all, Pete Golding is tied for third all-time in the SEC in playoff wins. That's hilarious.
Yes.
And second of all, when Ole Miss won the baseball national championship in 2022, they had to beat Arizona in Miami to advance.
Oh, yeah.
And this time they have to beat Miami and Arizona to advance. So it's kind of like a Kennedy secretary was named Lincoln type thing.
That's hilarious. Oh, man. And it's just something I know, like for Miami fans, this all feels like kind of a dream, Steven, to be even at this point. And it's not to say there's a feeling of playing with house money. Yeah, I don't think it's that, because I think anytime you get a little farther than you think you're going to get, the expectations change. And if Miami is unsuccessful in this game, there's going to be plenty of disappointment. Like, no one's going to say, hey, we're glad we got there. I mean, Miami wants to win the whole thing now that they've gotten this far, but it really does feel surreal, to think going back to early December, folks, myself included, I was pretty pessimistic when I woke up on, the selection day. I didn't think Miami was going to get in. I thought they had a chance to get to the playoff, but I ultimately thought they were going to be the first team out. So, to get that opportunity and then to have the road that Miami has had, right? To have to go into College Station and beat Texas A&M in the opening round, and then to have to beat the defending champs. It's crazy. And then I'll say for Ole Miss, I know obviously Tulane wasn't the toughest game to start out with, but they weren't supposed to beat Georgia, and they hung like 1,000,000 points on Tulane in that opening round, and they're doing all of this with all the staff changes and stuff. Like, it's really impressive, the resume that both the teams have put together to get here.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting because last year was kind of supposed to be both of these teams' year. To where you were going to get to the playoffs, and Ole Miss pulled a 9-3 and didn't make it. I think Miami was somewhere around 10-2, didn't make it. They were both around 15th in the nation whenever the final rankings came out. And this year was supposed to be kind of a rebuilding mode for both sides. And they turned it in. Ole Miss returned 2 starters off of last year's team. And they were able to turn this around to the point where this team would beat last year's Ole Miss team, which was much more talented than this team. This team would beat last year's team by 2 touchdowns.
That's amazing. Yeah. And for Miami, they had a generational offense last year led by Cam Ward. But they had no D, Steven. I mean, they couldn't stop a nosebleed on defense last year. And then this year, Miami's offense is good. They're not what they were a season ago, but they're, able to, in the games that they've won this year, control the clock. In the games they've been successful, they haven't committed a lot of turnovers. Carson Beck has managed games very well, but it's been the defense that's carried them to this point. So it's really been a flip of the script, right? New defensive coordinator Corey Heatherman. And then, Miami's defensive line is having an incredible year with a lot of the same personnel, but that same personnel is healthy. Ruben Bain was injured for most of last year. Akeem Mesidor has had injury struggles. He's healthier than he's ever been this year, and they've been able to get after quarterbacks at a high level, and they play a lot more aggressive with their new defensive coordinator. So it's really, like you said, last year should have been Miami's year, but the defense let them down. It should have been an Ole Miss year as well. And then look at that. I thought heading into this season, it might be a little bit of a rebuilding year, but I guess for the big programs in college football in the transfer portal era, you don't really rebuild anymore. You reload.
The coaches couldn't change, so the team made 2 big ones on Tuesday, and Kliff Kingsbury and Joe Witt Jr. are no longer Commanders.
You are Locked On Commanders, your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders.
The news of Tuesday afternoon, Tuesday morning is Kliff Kingsbury, Joe Witt Jr., the Washington Commanders moving on, quote unquote, from both of their coordinators. We're going to talk about the moves, why they were the right moves to make, why unfortunately the writing was firmly on the wall before these moves were made official, and then, of course, what could be coming up next. All of that coming up on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And it's all going to come down to change. At the end of the day, that's really what both these decisions come down to, is Kliff Kingsbury and Joe Witt Jr.'s inability or unwillingness. And in one sense, I really do think it's a little bit of an unwillingness more than it is an inability to change enough to adapt to the context of this season. And I want to be perfectly clear here. And I'm not putting words in Dan Quinn's mouth. I'm not putting words in Adam Peters' mouth, but just from my perspective, as we talk about these items, success was never the requirements, right? Success is always the goal, right? But like this conversation would not be necessarily different, or the conversation would be happening regardless of how many wins, losses, points scored, all that kind of stuff. But the problem is the two things are connected and correlated. The lack of wins, the lack of points scored per game, the lack of preventing teams from scoring points goes hand in hand with the reason that all these things happen. And we're going to start off with Kliff Kingsbury. Kliff Kingsbury, I think, is the biggest name in this story because of the fact that, one, Joe Witt Jr., like the writing has been on the wall really since November. So we're all kind of like, everybody has kind of received the idea, adapted to the idea, and understood that was probably coming. The Kliff Kingsbury conversation, although even going back to yesterday, was a little bit of a debate. Even in the Washington Commanders media room with all the beat reporters, I'm not going to name names on who was on what side, but there were still some people who actually thought Kliff might be coming back. And some who thought that the only way he wasn't coming back is if he got a head coaching job. Now, he might still get a head coaching job. And that's what really makes this whole situation interesting, is there are reports out there that Kliff Kingsbury is going to interview for the New York Giants job. He's going to interview for the Tennessee Titans job and do all those things. So it's kind of a question of, how is a coach that's a head coaching candidate in the National Football League also become a fired offensive coordinator? And listen, the report is from confirmed sources inside the team that Dan Quinn, Kliff Kingsbury met Tuesday morning and had a conversation about the way ahead for the offense. After that conversation, and I don't have details of what was said in the conversation, things like that, but after that conversation, both Kliff Kingsbury and Dan Quinn decided it would be mutually beneficial to go their separate ways. So that's how this is being shaped, and they're moving on from Joe Witt Jr. So they're not using the word fired. They're not doing all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, the bottom line is Kliff Kingsbury's out, Joe Witt Jr. is out. And Kliff Kingsbury, if you've been watching Locked On Commanders or listening to Locked On Commanders for the last month or so, you're not surprised by this move at all. And the reason it happened, again, is the hard-headed mentality of Kliff Kingsbury. We went through it in detail, so I'm not going to rehash all of the bullet points, all of the data points in this episode, but there are several episodes in the past you can go look for if you really want to check them out, that kind of detailed what the issue was with Coach Kingsbury in this season, because yes, injuries matter, right? Jaden Daniels leaves the game. Terry McLaurin has been out for a lot of the season. Noah Brown basically just non-existent. The O-line in recent weeks was hit by injuries pretty hard. Zach Ertz lost for the season in the Minnesota Vikings game. Austin Eckler lost for the season early in the year. Like, those things absolutely matter. And so when I say like success wasn't necessarily a requirement to feel supportive of Kliff Kingsbury continuing on with this team, what I mean by that is you need to see a coordinator, a leader of the offense who can adapt to the situation around him. And we can then understand, okay, you are limited by the equipment or, the resources that you have. Like, the quality of your quarterback goes down from first string to second string to third string. That's just like, we all understand that. The players themselves understand that the quality of the player goes down the further you get down the depth chart. So if we see Kliff Kingsbury making these adjustments and saying, okay, I don't have my, Terry McLaurin, how do I maximize my Deebo Samuel, things like that, then even in a losing season, even in a season where you're not a top 5 scoring offense, you could still find threads to pull on and say, this is why I still have confidence in this coach moving forward. I don't think those threads were there. Kliff specifically, when Terry McLaurin was out, it wasn't that Chris Moore was brought in and we're doing things that Chris Moore as an ex-receiver does well. No, we're asking Chris Moore to just simply do the things that Terry McLaurin is being asked to do, because Terry McLaurin is in turn just being asked to do what the Kliff Kingsbury ex-receiver does. Like, the Kliff Kingsbury ex-receiver with the Washington Commanders offense isn't catered to Terry McLaurin's strengths. It's just what the Kliff Kingsbury ex-receiver does. Now, in the last couple of weeks, we've seen Terry McLaurin do some things that, quite frankly, we hadn't seen him do in the last 2 seasons up until that point. And we hadn't seen him do, really, because we've had this complaint with Eric Bieniemy. We've had this complaint with Scott Turner, not maximizing his ability. And I've pounded the table in a not in the literal sense, in a figurative sense. There's the word. I've pounded the table in a figurative sense because it would be very disruptive to your listening experience if I pounded the table in reality, that Terry McLaurin can do more than run a go, a dig, and a hitch. Like, I promise you, he can do more of those things. You know what I mean? And very rarely do we see like an inside post over the middle. We saw one against the New York Giants. And I told you back then, one of the reasons it worked so well, you watch those Giants defenders, and they're not even really reacting to the possibility the 17 is about to run a middle of the field post. Why? Because they never have him do it. You see a right to left drag route from Terry McLaurin work beautifully, more than a drag route should ever work, against the Philadelphia Eagles in week 18. Why does it work as well as it does? Because Terry McLaurin never runs a right to left side drag route. Like, listen, I told Terry McLaurin yesterday in locker room clean, I said, brother, I saw you run that right to left drag route against Philly. I said, hold up. I don't know that I've seen him run a right to left side drag since Ohio State. Right. And I'm being hyperbolic here and all that kind of stuff, but it just goes back to the topic of, listen, you have weapons that this coaching staff just has not been utilizing to their maximum ability. So again, Terry McLaurin not running a Terry McLaurin crafted offense from Kliff Kingsbury. Instead, what he's doing is just running what the exposition runs for Kliff Kingsbury's offense. Deebo Samuel, same thing. What does a slot weapon do in a Kliff Kingsbury offense? It's the same thing Olamide Zaccheaus did in 2024. It's the same thing that Deebo Samuel did in 2025. These aren't schemes. These aren't plans of attack that are crafted for the players he has. They're crafted for the coordinator. These are things that the coordinator is comfortable with. And then within the pile of things the coordinator is comfortable with, then it's what is my quarterback most comfortable with within that. But you're already working with a limited scope. Then you're limiting it even further, just trying to do only what your quarterback is comfortable with. And I will tell you this, that if you live a life where you only do what you're comfortable with, what you're actually doing is stifling your own growth. So we want to know, where did Jaden Daniels grow in season 2? If you hear the conversations, right? I'm going to give a hat tip to my fellow beat reporter, Candy Waller of Bowie TV, the president of Bowie TV. She always tells people, use your clues. When you're listening to these coaches talk about where did Jaden Daniels grow, where did he grow? He grew in his understanding of protecting himself. He grew in getting an off-field view of what it looks like to play quarterback and be a little bit safer. He grew in his love for the game because it got taken away from him a lot. Where did he not grow? He did not grow schematically. He did not grow from a processing and a read progression standpoint. Why? Because the offense didn't challenge him to do so. When you stay within what you're comfortable with, you stifle your own growth. Go back to when Dan Quinn was hired by the Washington Commanders. He came in and said, what? We're not going to copy paste what we did in the past. What worked in Dallas, what worked in Seattle isn't necessarily going to work in Washington. What worked in 2025 isn't necessarily going to work in 2026. And what the Washington Commanders did in 2025 is tried to do what they did in 2024. And guess what? It didn't work. And because they were unable and or unwilling to shift from that path,
The wild card round is here, and FanDuel is officially in playoff mode. Before every game during the NFL playoffs, FanDuel is giving customers even more ways to get in on the action. Right now, every NFL playoff game day, FanDuel users get a profit boost pack waiting for them inside the app. Each game day, you'll see a pack loaded with multiple profit boosts you can apply to bets you like most. Open your profit boost pack first thing on game day and see what boosts you want to apply. The boost lets you lean into your game day instincts, whether you're backing momentum, defense, quarterback, play, or coaching. Every play feels bigger, and the boosts make your bets feel that way too. Visit FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL, and grab your profit boost pack every NFL playoff game day.
You are Locked On Lions, your daily Detroit Lions podcast.
News of the day, Albert Breer just breaking the story moments ago from Sports Illustrated, SI, NFL Insider. Albert Breer says the Atlanta Falcons have reportedly put in a request to interview Lions COO, Chief Operating Officer, Mike Disner, for their President of Football Operations role. Falcons have cleaned house. Rich McKay out. Terry Fontenot, their GM, out. Raheem Morris, Radio Raheem, he's gone, their head coach. So the Falcons are basically not starting over, but they've blown up their front office, and they're looking for a GM, a coach, and a president. And according to Albert Breer, Mike Disner, the Lions' right-hand man to really Brad Holmes and Rodwood, their COO, is going to be interviewed for that job. Disner is a guy that the Lions love. Everybody in that front office loves. He's been really good with the salary cap. He's moved up the ranks over the last few years to be somebody that is very, very important to Brad Holmes during the draft in terms of roster management, salary movement, all of that stuff. Disner is just really, really solid. And that would be a big loss to the front office if he was gone. But hey, an opportunity to run a franchise and be the president of football operations and everything else, in Atlanta. And the Falcons are not that far away. They're not. They've got a lot of talent there. Bijan Robinson's really good. Their front is good on defense. Drake London is good. If they keep Kyle Pitts, he's good. Falcons have some talent, and they underachieved this year in a bad division. So for Disner, it's going to be a great opportunity for him, and good for him to get that interview. This is really the first guy that we've heard about from the Lions coaching staff, front office, anybody that is going to get interviewed or is other teams have shown interest in. Remember, it was this time last year, Ben Johnson had already flown the coop to Chicago. Aaron Glenn was interviewing with the Jets. Hank Fraley was interviewing with Seattle. Antoine Randall was leaving for the Bears. JT Barrett left for the Bears. Lions had a lot of Terrell Williams, left for the Patriots. Lions had so much attrition last year in their front office, but this is the first person we've heard about, at least, Mike Disner, getting an opportunity to talk with the Atlanta Falcons. And I can see why. The Lions love him, and he's extremely popular down to 222 Rodwood Drive. All right. Roster issues and competition. Dan Campbell at his season-ending press conference yesterday. And by the way, Brad Holmes is going to speak Thursday afternoon in Allen Park. I told you yesterday, I want someone to ask Brad Holmes, hey, Dan Campbell said he's giving himself the letter grade of an F for the season. Will you do the same for yourself? And I have heard from a reporter today who will remain nameless because I'm not going to give it away until Thursday when hopefully he does it. This said reporter has texted me and said, I will ask that question. Hopefully it will get asked, and Thursday will unveil and uncover that unnamed reporter who is going to do that for us. But anyway, Dan Campbell said yesterday that he wants some competition. He wants to see the Lions get back to grit. He wants to see the Lions get that hunger back. Now, he didn't say they weren't hungry, but he said he wanted to see them get the hunger back. And he wants to see competition. Well, what spots is Dan Campbell talking about? Where should there be competition next year? Let's think about it for a second. Quarterback? No. Running back? No. Wide receiver? Probably not. Let's say they bring Khalif Raymond back. You've got your 4 wide receivers right there. And Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jamison Williams, Isaac Tesla, Khalif Raymond if he comes back. And you've got Tom Kennedy, Dominic Lovett. You've got others. Tight end? No. Sam Laporte is your starter. Is he talking about competition for the backup spot? Maybe Brock Wright, who got hurt, but they extended Brock Wright last year. What about one of the tackle spots? Well, if Taylor Decker retires, boom, there you go. Competition at left tackle. I'm all for it. Or do you move Sewell to the left side and you got competition on the right side? What about the guard position? Tate Ratledge right now is your starter at right guard. Christian Mahogany is your starter at left guard. Would they bring in some competition to push both those guys? I don't see why not, but Ratledge had a pretty good rookie year, and I think they really like Mahogany at left guard. Center, absolutely. Now, there will be no competition if the Lions dip into their wallets in free agency and hit a home run with Tyler Linderbaum, or they could, sign a couple of people, draft a guy, sign a guy, and do competition there. But the offense, I don't see a lot of competitive spots. Defense is another story. You want to put some competition out there for the interior of that defensive line? Let's do it. DJ Reader is a free agent and I think gone. Roy Lopez is on a 1-year deal. Josh Paschal, free agent. Mekhi Wingo could be let go. There are a lot of openings on the interior of that defensive line. Aleem McNeil makes a lot of money and did not have a good year, but he's coming back, you'd think. And you've got Tyleik Williams, who I think needs to be pushed. I know he was a first-round pick, but let's get we need depth. There needs to be some depth added to the interior of that defensive line. Same goes for the edge room with Aiden Hutchinson. He has his spot. But what about that opposite edge spot? Al-Qadim Muhammad, free agent. Marcus Davenport, free agent. Not sure who else is there right now, right? It's a wide open spot. Linebacker, Jack Campbell is the man. Pro Bowler, very, very good player. Gaines media poster boy, Alex Anzalone, free agent. You could have a competition at his spot if he's not back. What about Derek Barnes? Does he need to be pushed? He was a starter this year and really underachieved. Want to bring some competition in for Barnes? I'm game. Cornerbacks, DJ Reed on one side, Terrion Arnold on the other. That's what you figure the Lions will start the season with next year. But competition at corner to add depth has to be done. You could never have enough cornerbacks. Rakestraw coming back from injury. Dorsey coming back from injury. I don't think Amik Robertson's going to be back, although I'd love him back. Safety, the big question is Kirby Joseph's health. You got Brian Branch. You don't need competition for Branch. He's a stud. So really the big spots are one of the tackle spots that Decker retires, center, interior of that D-line. Maybe a linebacker spot, cornerback. That's what I think Dan Campbell's talking about. And they spent a lot of time at this time last year making the decision that they were going to bring the band back together. Onzarike, back. Davenport, back. Barnes, back. Aleem got extended back. They brought a lot. Dorsey back. They brought so many guys back. Glasgow back. A lot of one-year deals for guys. I think that'll change. I think the days of keeping the band together are done. There will be some guys retained. I'm hopeful Muhammad stays. I'm hopeful Robertson stays. I like Roy Lopez. I like Avonte Maddox, but you can't bring them all back.
The wild card round is here, and FanDuel is officially in playoff mode. Before every game during the NFL playoffs, FanDuel is giving customers even more ways to get in on the action. Right now, every NFL playoff game day, FanDuel users get a profit boost pack waiting for them inside the app. Each game day, you'll see a pack loaded with multiple profit boosts you can apply to bets you like most. Open your profit boost pack first thing on game day and see what boosts you want to apply. The boost lets you lean into your game day instincts, whether you're backing momentum, defense, quarterback, player coaching. Every play feels bigger, and the boosts make your bets feel that way too. Visit FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL, and grab your profit boost pack every NFL playoff game day.
College football is broken. Damon Williams in the transfer portal? What's going on, man?
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies.
Nick, this is insanity. So just before we even jump into all this, like Damon Williams in the transfer portal, and college football is broken, and I'm sure we have a lot to say about that. I was sitting here recording part of my show for tomorrow. And then I swear, I have 15 texts saying, "Are you okay? Like, what's going on?" And I was like, "What are you talking about? This is ridiculous."
Yep, I got the tweet notification from FAML, and I immediately thought that it wasn't like a real account. And then I went and looked, and I said, okay. And then it was in the On3 database, and very surprising. But at this point, nothing is shocking in the transfer portal. There's people entering left and right. It's been a chaotic couple of days. Feels like it's been a month, but it's only been open for 4 days now. And yeah, Damon entering the transfer portal is a massive hit for Washington. So yeah, let's get into it.
It's outside of it just like being a massive hit. This is, I think this, like you say, nothing can shock you anymore. And I certainly agree. After this, I'm just completely numb to everything the transfer portal has to offer. But this is one where, because we're sitting here 3 or 4 days ago, and I remember looking down my phone and seeing the Pete Thamel notification. Damon Williams is re-signed with Washington.
Mm-hmm. Oh, just a couple days ago, yeah.
Yeah, there you go. I'm like, all right, cool. Everything seems cut and dry. Now he's entering with a do not contact tag. So the only thing that this means is somebody put in a call to his representation. We're gonna do some speculation because there are some very obvious schools where that could be. And it was, yeah, all right. What's it gonna take? I was texting with people as we're setting this up and everything. 4 million, 4.5, 5. Is that the camp that we're going to get into? Like if Brendan Sorsby is getting $5 million to go to Texas Tech, I don't think it's that far off that somebody came in with that kind of offer to try to lure they did lure Damon Williams away from Washington. This is ridiculous.
Yeah, I think I immediately texted you. It's my first thought is SEC school, $5 million. I mean, that's just what. Total speculation, but that's, probably the direction this is going, especially when you see a do not contact tag. It's extremely surprising.
And this is one of those things where when we just kind of look at what Washington has done so far, not just necessarily in the transfer portal, but what Jed Fish's priorities have been since he got to Washington. It's all about player retention. It's all about doing those things. And it was very clear that Damon Williams had always been a priority at Washington. And the way that Jed Fish had structured his offense around him, all those sorts of things, I think that was all very clear. And the way that Jed has always propped him up and the way that everything just kind of had always unfolded. I don't I don't think you can blame Jed Fish for this in any regard either. No, I'm sorry. Please go ahead.
No, I would speculate it's financial, but yeah, as you said, the program has been, since Jed has arrived, it's been built around DeMond Williams. I mean, we talk to him in press conferences, and it almost always comes back to, well, DeMond Williams, he's 18, he's 19, he's learning things, he's developing, and almost any question you ask about the offense, Jed is always bringing it back to centering it around DeMond, talking about how knowledgeable he is on the iPad, going over plays. Immediately after, a play ends on the field, he's on the sideline diagnosing what happened before Jed does, before the coaching staff does. He's been, I think there's just been a big focus on making him the centerpiece of this program. Jed said that. I think it was last year, mid-season. He said DeMond Williams is going to be the face of the program next year. And it's surprising news to see this happen.
And this is one of the things, that's why we want to do this live. I couldn't believe it. Like truly, like you, I had to go and double and triple and quadruple check this. And it really just comes back to this one point of college football is completely broken at this point in time, because this isn't even the first time we've seen this around Washington when it comes to guys, for whatever reason, having issues with an NIL deal or something like that. I don't even think that there was an issue in this case. I'm not trying to speculate or anything. I don't even think that there was an issue here, though. It was just how much is it going to take?
Apparently he re-signed a couple days ago, whatever the re-signing process is. I don't know how that works, but yeah, it was pretty well-known news that he had just signed, along with several other guys that we had seen just on social media, kind of announcing they'd be coming back. You have to wonder, now, what's that going to look like for all these other players?
Exactly.
That's another conversation, honestly.
But I think that's a conversation that we should have, and not necessarily just with Washington, because I look at what this opens up in terms of an NIL budget for a quarterback, and we're going to get into that in a little bit later. But I think this is one of the things that we need to look at in this regard around college football too, because now all of a sudden, even now, I've seen a whole lot from people on Twitter, all over social media saying, hey, why should we care about these re-signings? Like, that players are supposed to come back to their program year in and year out. Yeah, they are. Mm-hmm. This is why, apparently. And it just sets off this whole other chain reaction of around college football. Now, all of a sudden, nothing means anything anymore. And I know that was, there's a cynical fan out there that would always say, yeah, it's always been that way. Nothing has ever meant anything. And I do think that was fair to an extent, but it was always like, all right, you and I are big football fans. We watch the NFL. We watch, I'm a huge baseball nerd, as you have to sit through every single time we're on the sideline at a UW practice. Yeah. But all of these things, like a contract, all that, it mattered. It all mattered. And now everything, just take it and throw it out the window.
Yep. And like I said, not shocked, but I am surprised. Earlier today, similar situation at Iowa. Cohen Intringer, 13-game starter, 73 tackles, career high. He entered the transfer portal just a few weeks ago. He had told reporters at Iowa that he would be coming back for his senior year. And just like that, he's in the portal. Same kind of situation there. Can't be shocked at this point. There's a lot of money at play. There's a lot of, I was going to say playing time, but it's obviously not playing time. So for some players it is, but in this situation, obviously not. But yeah, it's a system that it's whoever, it's the haves and potentially the have-nots who has the money to go get players that they can afford. And we're seeing that. I mean, look at Texas Tech. They were able to buy a massive roster and they made it to the college football playoff on the Big 12 this year. I mean, that's how player acquisition is going to happen these days. Who has the money? And we're seeing it at the top level, top quarterback, and one of the top quarterbacks in the Big Ten, DeMond Williams. And yeah, top players like that are going to go where the money is.
No, I couldn't agree with you more. That's what's going to happen. And this is why, I've been saying it for a while here on Lockdown Huskies, as a lot of my everydayers know. The NCAA needs to step in. That is the only thing that is going to change this. That is the only thing that can fix anything going on in this sport, because this was one of those things where we'd seen it hit Washington in some regards, right? Where it's okay, yeah, it's a player here. Oh, that's an unfortunate loss there. This is what it is. That's just part of college football. But to see it happen like this on this level, I feel like there is, and this isn't even me just saying this or you from a Washington guy perspective, being, credentialed media members that cover the team. No, this is just something that if you don't find a way to step in and fix this quickly, nobody is going to have any kind of affiliation, not just necessarily with the team, because at the end of the day, that's what it all comes back to. But no one is going to have a favorite player anymore because they say, oh, even if he resigns, there's a chance that 48 hours later, he's going to wind up in the transfer portal. And that's just absolutely insane. And that's something that's, I don't even want to say it's just unacceptable, because it goes beyond that. It just severs any kind of connection that anybody would want to have with their favorite team.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was Nebraska had initially landed a quarterback in the transfer portal, and Kentucky went and flipped him. Probably financial reasons there too. I don't know the details of that, and then I don't know all the details of how the NCAA would need to come in and regulate this. But you're totally right. I mean, there's affiliation with player to school. It's different than it used to be when you would sign on to a school and play for 4 years. I mean, just a few years ago, to transfer, you had to sit out a year and you had to get like a waiver, and it was very complicated to even go to a new school. And as soon as they granted immediate eligibility to college football or college athlete transfers, it really changed everything. And I think I saw it was at Colorado. I could be wrong. One of these, it was a Power 4 school, someone donating to NIL booster, someone in that regard was like, I don't want to give money anymore. I'm paying, I paid a player last year to join this team, and he joined the team and it worked out, but then he, played really well, and now he's getting money to go somewhere else. It's like, there's no incentive to donate to that NIL or what, whatever it is for these boosters or anything like that, because like you said, the affiliation is just, it's different now.
The wild card round is here, and FanDuel is officially in playoff mode. Before every game during the NFL playoffs, FanDuel is giving customers even more ways to get in on the action. Right now, every NFL playoff game day, FanDuel users get a profit boost pack waiting for them inside the app. Each game day, you'll see a pack loaded with multiple profit boosts you can apply to bets you like most. Open your profit boost pack first thing on game day and see what boosts you want to apply. The boost lets you lean into your game day instincts, whether you're backing momentum, defense, quarterback, player coaching. Every play feels bigger, and the boosts make your bets feel that way too. Visit FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL, and grab your profit boost pack every NFL playoff game day.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast.
As of Tuesday evening, Shams Charania of ESPN did a TV hit today that kind of moved the ball forward a little bit on the latest. Of course, Shams was the one yesterday that kind of reported that the two sides, Trae Young and his agent and the Hawks, are working together now on a potential trade. It's no longer cloak and dagger. Like, everyone knows the deal here. It's not a trade request. Just everybody kind of knows what's going on both sides. Shams reiterated all what he reported on Monday, that the two sides are doing that. And then he also just said plainly that the tenure for the Hawks and Trae is, quote, coming to an end. And he noted that it, quote, appears to be in his final days and weeks when it comes to Trae Young with the Hawks. But notably, Shams did pretty plainly note near the end of this discussion that it's not a lock to resolve before the deadline. So I know everyone's assuming that it's just going to be done and he's definitely going to be gone. But I said yesterday, and I'll say it again now, with trades in particular, and even doubly so in season, nothing is a lock to be done until it's done. Like, there is still a chance. It might be a small one, I'll grant that Trae Young is on this roster beyond the deadline. That is not a non-zero possibility. I think Shams acknowledged that today by pointing to the fact that, like, it could be done in the summer still. He also did say that I thought was notable, that he is told that, quote, both Trae Young and the Hawks know that he just doesn't fit with the current team anymore, end quote. And then also pointed out that Trae Young's side of things would, if he is traded, like to find a team where he can actually get an extension. That is a very natural and basically the logical wish for any player in this spot. We'll come back to another guy in a second that's related to the Hawks that has the same desire. So that's a very normal thing, not out of the ordinary whatsoever. But that's the latest. There isn't anything massively new on that front today. Everyone just kind of understands that it's Trae and the Hawks working together. And while I think people were just like, hey, this is going to get done any second yesterday, it was never quite that close from what I understand. And I will also say that it could be any day, any hour, but it could not be at the same time, which is always an uncomfortable place to be if you are reporting on a situation like I am. Beyond the Wizards' interest, which was reported on yesterday a lot, I floated some teams on the show last night that were more just speculation teams, not the full reporting of the Wizards that have been out there. But Mike Scotto, friend of the podcast from Hoops Hype, formerly at the Athletic, reported that the Bucks, the Wolves, and the Clippers, quote, have monitored Trae Young's situation, end quote. For one, those are teams that I did mention before on the podcast, also on my Patreon today, because they don't really have long-term point guard options on their roster that are like locked in. And they're all also kind of in varying degrees of trying to win sooner rather than later. Not like imminently. Minnesota is kind of trying to win the title this year, but Milwaukee and LA are just trying to kind of figure out what's going on in the future. Trae might have some appeal to those teams. I will also say that Minnesota and LA in particular would be much more logical and possible in the summer because of the way that the deals would have to go down. Like Minnesota doesn't want to have salary matching in season once they want to trade Rudy Gobert. And I kind of have a hard time seeing Minnesota doing that in season and kind of revamping their entire team on the fly. LA has James Harden, who might leave at the end of the season, but if he's on the team, you don't really want Trae on the team. They're kind of overlapping. So all that said, plausible, but again, I will note this. The way that Mike wrote that was that it was very soft language. That does not say those teams are definitely going to be interested in Trae Young. Monitoring the situation, it's not like calling and beating down the door for Trae Young, but some teams that are tangentially added to the mix at the very least. That's also a good reminder, something that I probably should have said yesterday, but with a nice round number of 1 month till the deadline, I will also point this out, and I shared a lot on social media this time of year, but even before the drama broke on Monday, I was talking about this over the weekend. With the deadline approaching, it is always a good idea to take the time to actually read how the reports are phrased, both or listen to them if they're set on TV or on a podcast. This is a lost thing. I don't know if it's media literacy or whatever, but part of this is that there's the Twitter handles like NBA Central that kind of repackages stuff irresponsibly a lot of the times, bad aggregation. Go back to the original source and actually see how stuff is phrased and written. You can often glean a lot about a report by not just taking the top line information, but actually parsing what is written and said. Also, try to figure out where the information is coming from. And I'll do that for you on some stuff about the Hawks. But like, why is this being reported? Who is it coming from potentially? Whether it's the agent, the team, the player, etc. For example, the Hawks are not really a leaky organization under Anssi Solei's leadership. I know he just started a few months ago, but that's the reputation the Hawks have under Anssi. I'm not saying that they would never leak stuff, because I'm sure they will at some point leak some stuff, but they're known around the league as not a team that's going to be super leaky with information. So the Hawks come up like from Hawks stuff comes up from teams, other teams comes up from agents, outside sources more than actually inside sources. Last thing I'll say on this, and then we'll get to AD in a second. There were multiple national outlets that did kind of like fake trade posts or stories on Trae Young today. And that's natural. Like, it's the time to do that. I don't love making up fake trades because it's like kind of not productive, but I do understand why. And if you do it responsibly, it can be fun. Like the Wizards stuff in particular, once a team is reported, it's very natural to be like, hey, how would this actually work? And I spent a little time yesterday talking about this on the show, like how a structure might function with the Hawks and the Wizards. But ESPN and the Athletic did those pieces and had some actual reasonable ones. I went through some of the Wizards stuff last night, but for example, one of the four that my friend Sam Vecini wrote at the Athletic was a deal with the Wizards for CJ McCollum, Corey Kispert, and the OKC first-round pick that the Wizards have that is likely to be number 30 overall, like literally last in the first round. It's a first-rounder, kind of in name only, but still a reasonable asset as kind of a sweetener to make the deal happen. I know there was reporting yesterday, and I explained this in detail about Mark Stein's first report about how the Wizards maybe asked for draft capital along with Trae Young. Mark then softened on that. And again, the Wizards asking for it does not mean the Hawks will have to give them that. I think Sam's projection is like a pretty reasonable one of what it would take for a deal to get done. But as many have pointed out on the internet today and yesterday and in reporting, et cetera, the Wizards kind of have a mixed incentive. This was brought up yesterday on the show a little bit when I talked about it, but the Wizards might not want to do the deal right now because they're trying to not win a ton of games this season too. There's this back and forth. Also, we'll get into later on in the podcast. Trae's also not like going to just definitely sit out between now and the deadline, and a month is a long time. So it's kind of this waiting game on all sides, but I thought Sam's projection was pretty reasonable of the type of deal the Hawks might do around Trae. This is not me saying that I'd be rushing to do this trade. I am a little bit higher on Trey in this whole process that everybody else seems to be. I'm not saying that the Hawks should keep him for sure. I think it's natural, and I think it makes some sense to move on from Trey at some point. But I think a lot of the points that I'm seeing, like the Hawks have to do this now, I would not be in a have to do position if I was the Hawks. That's kind of my overarching take on the situation. But that's not a bad return, is because it clears the books a little bit. Kispert's a reasonable contract. You get a small asset back. That's something you can at least do without too much pain. That's where I'll leave it for now.